Like for me, I invested in like these like thinner balloons and thicker balloons, and I've
Uh,
been able to create new designs from that because I'm like, oh, like for the belt, I can use this thinner balloon so that it doesn't look too bulky,
right.
and it gives it a better definition for that detail. And for this thicker balloon, I can make the face just with one balloon instead of making it with several, and so it looks like smoother. Um, just different stuff like that that I've been able to use to venture into new ideas and new things. But if I didn't take the risk of investing in those types of balloons, I would have never known if I could have done something new with them. Welcome back to the Out of the Box podcast. This is Jose and Steele with your host for the podcast today. And I just want to say thank you guys for being with us in this journey. This is going to be podcast number 100. And so we're super glad that you have been with us along this journey for all this time. So thank you guys. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for all the great comments and for the feedback that y'all provided. We really appreciate that and take that to heart. But without further ado, today we're going to be talking about the process of doing creative work. And this podcast really came from the idea of a book actually called The Practice from Seth Godin. And we're going to dissect a little bit what he said and just personal experiences, what we've learned as creatives, doing creative work and putting it out in the world. And so Steele, I know we were talking about this before the podcast, and we were mentioning that sometimes, there's so much pressure from society to to get work out, or not just get work out, but also have uh, a successful outcome, right? So if somebody's writing a book, that it be a bestseller. If somebody's writing a song, that will be top 40 in the pop list. So there's always that aspect of hey, this has to be successful, we have to win, we have to put work that's only going to make us money, right? And I think a lot of creatives, if and not just creatives, because creatives could be entrepreneurs that solve problems creatively. It could be artists, it could be mathematicians, it could be scientists, whatever field of study. People have to use creativity in order to solve problems that will push society forward, right? And so that's the value of a creative human being, that they move society forward in that particular subject. Um, so what do you think about the aspect of outcomes, right? We're so focused on outcomes and getting successful work out. Is that something you have thoughts about? Or because I know you're a very creative person, and sometimes I've seen you just do it for the sake of doing.
Yeah, definitely. I'll jump into that. And what you said real quick about the outcomes, I think the reason why the society we live in, is directed towards thinking about outcomes, even for art, is because I think it's deeply ingrained in us to survive, almost like a survival instinct. If you thought of outcomes as our survival instinct protecting us, and so basically protecting us in a sense of giving us shelter, clothing, food, water, all of the essentials to live. And to do that in the society we live in, we need to have resources and we need to have money. And outcomes are almost like the symbolic form of that. It's almost like the underlying reason for getting an outcome, a successful outcome. It's like you could almost trace it back to the outcome is going to give us money for food, shelter, clothing, water, and all the essentials for life, to live, to survive, literally tracing it back to the survival instinct.
Mhm.
And so maybe that's where that comes from. And so, but then it kind of generalizes, like other things generalize, and it generalizes to other areas of life. Like we need to have a successful outcome, not just in our career, but for art, or for whatever thing we pursue in life, right? You can see how that could generalize and spread to other things that you wouldn't originally associate together, like art and money or whatever, right? And that's so I think that's maybe how that process happens. But in terms of what I think about it, and my experiences, like you mentioned before the podcast, like sometimes I'll make these Lego animations and put them on my YouTube channel, just kind of like to see what will happen, like for fun, and because I enjoy it and I can say I agree. Like I did those, they took a long time to make, they take a lot of patience, but I wasn't really doing them with the mindset of, oh, I want to get thousands of views and I want to get all these likes and money or whatever. I was just making a Lego animation because it was something I thought was fun to do. And personally, I find fulfillment and enjoyment and the reward for me is seeing the outcome of the finished product, like seeing how the Lego animation turns out once it's done. That's what motivates me to do it. Like it's fun and enjoyable the process of making it, but then also just seeing how it turns out. Like for me, that's enjoyable.
Yeah, and so you're not even thinking about what if people are gonna enjoy it themselves or what people are gonna think. You're just thinking about like, hey, I just really love to
Yeah.
film Legos and take pictures and move their arms so that it looks like an animation, um, and have different Legos come to life in the screen.
Yeah, like
And just
I'm sure in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I think it'd be cool if people would like this, or I hope people enjoy it. But I think what motivates me more is like creating something that hasn't been created yet, and something that like I'll look on YouTube for a Lego animation and I don't see it, so then I'll make it because it doesn't exist yet. So like the Breaking Bad Lego thing, I think I made that because I didn't see anything that was good enough to the high standards that I wanted to see. And so I was like, well, I want to see it and it doesn't exist. So I'll just make it myself and
mm,
the standards that I have in my mind of what I want. Same thing for like the Freddy versus Breaking Bad. And, it's like, oh, that'd be so cool to see. It doesn't exist yet. Well, I'll just make it, and then I'll get to see
yeah.
it.
And you know what's so interesting? Yesterday, on Wednesday, I got to interview Wes Hartman. He's a comic book artist. And he says that a lot of his ideas for comics or new comics have actually come from the fact that he hasn't found anything out there that was related to what he wanted to see. So he wanted to have a different ending for the Jurassic Park um like movie, and he really enjoyed like 30 seconds of something that he wanted to have like developed, right? He wished that they would have developed that more, and he was thinking like it would have been more interesting that way. So he went and created it himself.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that there's certain patterns for creatives, that they they don't create from a void. They create from seeing something that's lacking in the world, and so they're sharing that to the world because they're like, hey, I think that's a missing piece that somebody that I would enjoy. Maybe
Yeah,
somebody might enjoy it too. I'll
exactly.
go create it, and see what happens.
That's
You know,
exactly it. That's the
but
feeling.
you follow that bliss of just enjoyment. Like, hey, I want to see this come to life, and nobody else has done it. Maybe I could do it,
That's
and
that's like what you've
that's
done.
awesome.
You've done that too, like, you've mentioned ideas, like the balloon animation you wanted to make that you're thinking about. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that exists yet, and I think maybe you felt that way, I don't know, you tell me, like, was it kinda like that, or do you like there's, like, a
Yeah, no, it's definitely like that. Like I see different TikToks and people doing like different skits and stuff like that. And I was like, well, you know, people have the same face. They just switch their hat and now they're a different person, or they take off their glasses and a different shirt and they do the skit like that, right? So I was thinking, well, what if I could have myself record it and do different voices and just with different balloon animated masks.
yeah.
Um,
I don't think I've ever seen that before, so, I mean, that's an example, like, there's, like, all these gaps, and I think us as creative people are, like, it bothers us. I don't know if that's how you feel, but, like, it's almost like when I see a gap or I see a movie that's, like, it didn't turn out the way I expected it to, or there's just a whole genre or a whole idea or story idea that doesn't exist yet, or a Lego animation that doesn't exist yet, or a painting that doesn't exist yet. And in my mind, I'm like, well, it bothers me. And I'm like, I feel the desire or like compulsion. I feel compelled to fill in that gap and make it, you know? Like, I don't know, there's something weird and interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's almost like a service to the world, and that's what the book is talking about. Like our work can serve people, right? It can serve them in different ways, like just the aspect of inspiring their imagination. Um, and it's sad to hear that sometimes art programs are the first ones to be cut off from school systems when they're lacking funds, right? And as much as science and mathematics has a direct outcome, right, to a profitable and thriving society, art does have its place as well. I mean, we've seen it through generations of civilizations.
We
You
can
know, we can understand what happened in those cultures because of the art that was created, because of the architecture, because of the writings from different people. So it was artists who communicated what was going on in that time to future generations. If
yeah,
it wasn't for them, we wouldn't understand what happened,
we wouldn't know
right?
what those civilizations did. And so let me ask you a philosophical question related to that. How do you think the world, thinking about all of history, would change if art did not exist? How would it affect us? Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I will. I think, just from the top of my head, I would say that if art didn't exist, we would be still in the primitive aspects of society. We would still be like hunter gatherers kind of deal.
Because you need
Because if we're just like going for outcomes, if we're just focusing on outcomes and just doing work, then that's what we would still be doing. We would still all be farmers, all be hunter gatherers.
Mhm.
There wouldn't be. I think it's through the aspect of creativity and art that we were able to start building houses, building, you know, the creative aspect of human beings started developing into bigger societies, bigger buildings, theaters,
Yeah,
studios, music.
and at
You know,
first
it's what started moving the ball forward into
yeah,
like an evolving generation of culture. And you see it nowadays, like now music streaming, movie streaming, like it's evolving, and it's sometimes what people consume. It's
right.
what moves the ball forward. Star
Yeah,
Wars,
that's
Disney, like that's what people talk about. That's what people feel inspired about.
right,
And if
and that's
people
another
can't dream of like flying cars
yeah.
because they never seen it or never thought about it, then they will never be created.
Yeah, and at first I was kinda skeptical, but I think when you put it that way, like, yeah, because you have to be kinda creative to come up with a new idea, and that new idea is what sparks the innovation to create a new product or a new way of transportation or housing. I wonder if society could still evolve technologically, like, without creativity, but it's almost like, because even Albert Einstein was really creative, and there's other scientists that were extremely creative, and it was their curiosity and their creativity that drove them to invent and create new things that were outside of the box, you know? So I think without that outside of the box thinking, maybe society would stay the same. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I could see it to where society would accidentally stumble upon new innovations by accident. Like, oh, this stone like moves and it rolls, so that could be a wheel, you know? But then I'm like, you also have to have a vision and you have to draw things, you have to draw blueprints, and you have to be good at drawing blueprints to come up with a new design for a new product. So like a car or something, right? So I can kind of see that going either way. Like that's a hard question, but yeah. I also think psychologically, like people might be affected without art because art is entertainment, right? I mean, movies, like you said, music, if we took that all away, if no one was creative or artistic and we only went for outcome, it makes me think that society would be like kind of emotionless, depressed, like there would be no
or just bland,
yeah.
just like one directional.
And entertainment's an escape, right? Like I don't know if you've ever felt better after like watching a movie or listening to music. I feel like we use entertainment to escape the harsh realities of the world in some way. We use art to help take our mind away from what's stressing us out. I'm not saying it's the only way, but it seems like it's a pretty important thing in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't wanna venture too far, from the main topic,
Yeah,
um,
I wanted to ask
but
you about the process stuff.
it does, yeah, I think that that might be a thought for future podcasts about, you know, would civilizations still exist as they are today
That's
without the aspect of creativity?
that's good because I wanted to ask you about what you were saying earlier about the process and versus the outcome. Like, you were
Mhm.
saying something really interesting about it.
Yeah, and I think, like, for me, sometimes I'm scared to work on things because I almost associated the creative aspect with a feeling. It's like, oh, I have to feel a certain way in order to get inspired. But from reading the book from Seth Godin, I've realized that it's actually not much of a feeling, but rather of an action. It's something you do, not how you feel, right? And so what I mean by that is that sometimes like I'm overthinking about whether a melody or a song or something is gonna be good. But it's funny because I've seen this with balloon art, like having done it for now 13 years. When I start doing a new figure, right? They show me a picture of what they want, Baby Yoda or whatever character they want made out of balloons. I just look at the picture and start creating. And I'm not thinking about whether it's gonna be good, whether it's gonna be bad. And I've never really pinpoint until right now that I'm actually like
Uh,
um introspecting this. Um But that's what I do. I've done it for 13 years, just start working on something
into
and
a flow
go
state.
somewhere until it goes somewhere, you know? And of course, there's repertoire in my head of what I've done in the past, so I can make associations in my head, 3D images in my head to 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 um to create this new character. But it's so interesting because I just start and don't think about how it's going to turn out. And actually in those moments is when I have really good ideas because I'm like, "Oh, you know what? Actually, you see it in a different way and you're like, I'm going to use this marker to color in right here and that's going to give that shadow or that exact image of the character." And
A complicated process,
it's a complicated process,
But
but
you've been
once you
doing
think
it so
about it,
You've been doing it so long, it's just you naturally flow state. Like you talked about the brain's roads. The more you travel down that road in your brain, the easier it gets. And after like, 12 or 10 plus years of doing it, those roads are so ingrained in your brain for making the balloon that you don't think about it and you just kind of like go.
you just do it. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I've done it as a job, for so long that like I don't even think about like, oh, I have to be creative right now.
Mm,
I just do it. I just start making it. Hey, I want a robot. And I'm like, okay. So I have some metallic colors balloons. So I'm like, oh, I'll start there, right? That's my initial instinct to start there. Then am I gonna make the face triangle, rectangular? Okay, rectangular. Okay, so I'm gonna make a rectangle. And then I start adding different buttons or different colors that I draw on the the robot because robots have buttons. Um, right? So I start making associations of what people know to be a robot, right? And then also get to add my own spin to it by placing the eyes in a certain location or just that's kind of how like my wheels start turning, but I'm not thinking about like, oh, I'm gonna be creative. I'm just doing the work,
Yeah.
right? And I
Right.
think a lot of people, and that's sometimes how I feel with music, that I haven't built up the practice of doing it. So
Ex
sometimes it seems almost mysterious or like magical. And it's like, oh, maybe the song just arises out of thin air from an angel that sings to you or something, and it's almost like you're detaching yourself from from the aspect of the work, right? So you're saying like it has to be only through inspiration that creativity or music can come from, but it's like no, you just start doing it and your instinct will lead you to a certain direction and you just follow that. You follow that direction, just like making balloons. You
Yeah.
just
So
start and see where it takes you.
that's right. And so tell me more about like what you said before, like about there's an outcome, but there's also a process. And you said how it's the book talks about falling in love with the process.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's so cool because I know I shared this story before we started the podcast, but it it shares um the story of Seth Godin, the author. He was learning how to do fly fishing. And so he says that when they started learning the throw of how to throw the fishing rod, they they put a hook towards the end with a fly. So that's why they call it fly fishing, because you're trying to catch fish with the fly. So what he did, which was so contrary to what they were teaching, was he removed the hook and he removed the fly, of course, and he was just practicing his throw. He was just practicing his throw, falling in love with the aspect of throwing, right? The aspect of throwing. And people told him like, "Hey, that's kind of crazy. You're never going to catch any fish with that." And it's true. He was never going to catch any fish with that, but that was not the purpose of doing it. He was just trying to fall in love with the process of throwing because it was the initial step to learning how to catch a fish.
Yeah.
And he knew that if he enjoyed throwing the fishing rod, whether he caught fish that day or not, he just enjoyed throwing the fishing line. And so once he added the hook and the fly, he actually had um like more success catching fish than the others, because it was that initial throw that was what made the difference, in the practice of just enjoying the aspect of throwing without any outcome in return was a little bit what he's trying to portray in the book, but it's actually what moves people into falling in love not only with the work, but also falling into new ideas. Because if we're just thinking about the outcome, catching the fish, then maybe we're just half doing the throw and we're never going to catch anything because we're just half doing it because we want to get that fish. So maybe we're putting a bigger fly on the
Cutting
fishing,
corners. Yeah, cutting corners.
cutting corners, yeah, or maybe I'm gonna throw it in that direction where I see more fish, and so maybe I'll just go with what's secure, or what might bring allure more fish in, but it's actually they're losing the meaning of fly fishing, which is throwing the fishing rod, right? That's that's kind of like what he's trying to portray. He also did another example with like learning how to juggle. So he was saying like how you start off, the process that is similar to the artistic process is just, you know, do it for the process. So you grab one ball that you're gonna juggle and you just throw it up in the air and let it fall on the ground. And so the more that you do it, you keep throwing it, it keeps falling in the ground. Some people might get discouraged from that because a lot of people have the instinct of wanting to catch it, and that's the outcome, right? They want to be able to catch the ball, throw it and catch it, throw it and catch it. But what he's explaining is that no, it's in the throw. And so once you have a good throw that lands in the same spot over and over again, then the catching it will be easier after that because you know it'll fall right next to you. But if you throw it and one throw is like really far and then the other throw is really short, then you're trying to catch these like really bad throws. And so the aspect of juggling is not in the catching, but in the throwing. And so if you fall in love with just having good throws, the catching aspect will be much easier. And so if we could relate that to the creative aspect, it's just like, hey, writing lyrics or just making melodies and falling in love with, oh, look, that sounded really good. And maybe what if I added this note there, and like instead of doing ba da da da, you do ba da da da, and so you're like, oh, that sounded really cool. It sounded different. Um, and just um like changing it up like that is I think where people can fall into new ideas, right? It's almost like accidents, how they say the light bulb was an accident or different stuff, different
Oh,
inventions
yeah,
were accidents. It's just they weren't accidents. They were just doing the work. They were doing the practice of venturing into the unknown every day, and then they just happened to find it, or it was revealed to them, you know?
yeah, when you're in love with the process, you're more open to that. I feel like you're taking your time because if you're only focused on the outcome, maybe you're rushing it and then you're less likely to stumble upon something new. Because if you're just trying to rush to the end goal and that's all you have in mind, well, then it means like the end goal is static and concrete. It's not going to change. It's not flexible because you only have one idea in mind. But if you're willing to be open about it during the process because you're more in love with the process than the outcome, then you're more open to new ideas, mistakes, and changing it up and going outside the box more, and so then you'll create something more original, new, compared to just trying to make a factory made standardized product. And that could be applied to films, but but yeah,
Mhm.
no, I think like you
Yeah,
being in
it's
love with
it's
the
what in
process.
the book in the book they call it the recipe for success, right? So you have a formula, that you're like,
Yeah,
oh well, if I add really good music and the scenes are like like shot from this angle, you're gonna have a great movie.
exactly. And unfortunately, a lot of movie studios are doing that recently. They're just
With Marvel, they
yeah,
just it's like now there's no like different storyline. It's just the
I
same
wonder,
storyline,
maybe
just
it's
like
because
with different characters.
they're more in love with the box office outcome than they are with the process of filmmaking. Maybe
Exactly.
that
So
could
it's getting that big um banner or getting um like something on social media that keeps rolling. But what I thought was interesting was like, for example, the Spider-Man movies.
oh yeah,
It's never been done before to add all three Spider-Mans into one
yeah,
movie.
exactly.
Like that added so much like
People loved it. Like,
aspect. Yeah, like
yeah,
people loved it because it's never been done before, you
yeah,
know?
that's why it was good, I think.
Yeah, so it was innovative, it was relatable, and people enjoyed it because it was something new, right? And I'm sure like they must have had to cross a lot of barriers to get to have all Spider-Mans
Oh,
into one movie, right? Because there's like copyright stuff and all
right.
this other
It was
things.
probably like a creative risk, but it was a creative risk that paid off because people love that movie. Like, because a lot of people say it's their favorite Marvel
Yeah.
movie of recent.
And it's like it must have been from the idea of like what we were saying earlier. I'd never seen all Spider-Mans come in one movie. And it's like, oh, wait, I want to see that. I want to see
Oh,
all three Spider-Mans in one movie and have them come from different universes because
exactly.
now there's the idea of the multiverse. And so that would be so awesome. And so that's I think where the idea of like I want to see this on screen.
Yeah. Loving the
How do
process.
I get this? And that came from from taking that risk,
Yeah,
right?
I think
Of saying like, "Hey, I'm not gonna follow a recipe of, maybe making another Spider-Man movie,
playing it safe,
playing
just
it safe."
I think that comes from loving the process, and so I'm kinda curious. There's been times in my life where I feel like maybe I didn't love the process as much, and then the outcome maybe didn't turn out as good. Because there's been films that I've made where I wasn't necessarily in love with making the movie, so I wasn't in love with the process, I was just thinking about it was, like, for different reasons, and I can think of one example, and I'm curious about whether you've experienced it. For me, I made a movie called Freddy versus Jigsaw versus Jason, FJJ for short, on my old back in the old days of probably middle school and starting high school. And I made it with my friends, and at first I was kind of in love with the process of the idea because I was in love with the idea. I thought it'd be cool because it's never really been done before, all those characters in one movie. Um, so at first I was in love with it, but then as I started making it more and more, I started falling out of love with the process of making it. And I feel like, and I actually, that was one of the few movies, maybe even the only one that I never finished. So it really shows you how much I just wasn't in love with it as much as I thought in the beginning. And so I feel like you can fall out of love with the process of what you're doing at some points in your life. And then it doesn't turn out as good as a result. Cause I don't think it turned out very good, and that's probably why I feel like, so that's just like an example of how what can happen when you don't fall in love with the process. It doesn't turn out as good. And maybe you can fall out of love with it sometimes.
Yeah. And it's sometimes also, I think at the beginning stages for artists or for creators or entrepreneurs, the first times that you do something, you're not going to be really great at it. Maybe if you do, like it's just, it's a one hit wonder, or, something that just happened to come up. But it's in the process of doing it and falling in love with that you actually improve. So it's actually enjoying doing vocal warm-ups, or doing film shoots, right? And loving the process of being in the sun, and then having to like crouch down and be on a weird position to get a certain angle for a shot, and it's just enjoying that aspect of doing it,
Yeah.
rather than like, oh man, like, will this movie make it into the block, but to the theaters? Yeah,
Box office. You know
box
what?
office.
It's funny that it really brings up in my mind that when I think back, like the times when I wasn't in love with making a movie scene and didn't turn out, they're just not as good. I feel like some of the best movie scenes that I've done are the ones that I love, where I love the process or the idea, where I really was passionate about it the most. Like solipsism was that was probably the one I was most passionate about and I knew most about, and people tend to love that one the most out of all the ones I've made. And then I can pick individual scenes in movies that I filmed, and the scenes that people tend to like the most are the ones that I also loved making the most. I love the process of doing the most. So I feel like it makes a difference. Maybe it affects the end product, how good it is how much you're in love with it. And so I'm kind of wondering what you think about that, and if there's times in your life of your art where you have not been in love with the process, and it still did it, and maybe it turned out different. Like I'm kind of curious about if you've ever experienced it.
Like not being in love with the process but still finishing it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was there was one time when I tried doing quinceañera like video, like, so here in San Antonio, quinceañeras are big thing, of course, in Mexico and like the Mexican culture, but it's almost like a wedding, but it's like when the girl becomes a woman basically in the culture, and so they have this whole party, and they usually have somebody record the whole thing, and so I was like, hey, I want to make some extra money. Maybe this could be another thing that I could do. So I did the whole recording. I even went with Emilio. I know we've had them
Yeah.
in the podcast, but so we recorded, and I gave them a really good price, but I didn't realize it was gonna take so long to edit like 10 hours of content,
Yeah.
right? And so I was like, man, so I spent 2, 3 months just editing this quinceañera video that I charged like, I don't know, like $300 or something for. which was like at the end of the day, I didn't make any profit. Um, or maybe like some, but it's just like calculated with the amount of hours I put in, it was just didn't make sense. But either way, like um, I enjoyed recording and doing all of that, but then when it came to the editing aspect, I was like, man, I just don't enjoy this that much anymore. Like I'm here every day in the editing booth, editing this piece of content, and it's just like it feels like it's never gonna end. Um, like I'm having like nightmares of like trying
Nightmares.
to finish this, and it's not enjoyable anymore. But it was for a friend, right? So it was a
Mm,
good friend of my dad's, and so I was like, but I have to finish this. I have to finish this because I can't let it go past more than 6 months. I don't want to, so I have to finish this. So I was every day going into the editing booth, just kind of like editing, changing the lighting, changing the motions, just adding stabilizers so that those shaky shots would be fixed, trying to tell a story of like how the quinceañera went. So just different stuff like that that I was just playing around with. And part of it was was interesting, but I didn't enjoy it at all. Like I just didn't want to go and edit the quinceañera video, but I knew I had to finish it.
right. Oddly,
So So it has happened, it has happened before, but it's just like the aspect of doing it, doing the work. Not for any like outcome. I guess the outcome at that point was like I need to finish. Um, but it's almost like I'm sure you get this a lot with editing too. Like it's almost like you're never done with art. Like there's always something else that you can do, another color or a shot that you can add.
yeah, that's how I feel with my movie right now.
Yeah, and so it's like with any artwork, art is never done, and so just have to be there has to just come a point where you're like, okay, I'm done, and this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna structure it like this, and that's how I'll know that I'm done.
Yeah,
And
because
so that's what I did, man. I just had to kind of structure it in my head and say like, I'm just gonna add a scene from the church, a scene from the party, and the different aspects that came about it, the dance with the dad, blah blah blah. And so I had to just sit down and structure it like that. And yeah, it worked out pretty good. It worked out pretty good. Like, I was just glad that I was done with it, and it actually helped me get, some jobs later on for the whenever I worked for the television network, I showed them that quinceañera video, and they were like, "Oh, wow, like,
that's good.
that's really cool." People just see that, our video, and don't realize
Much
that
work.
it took,
Oh,
3 months to make.
and so it paid off in some sense, right? Like,
It paid off,
yeah,
yeah, like, in
so
some
that's
sense.
an example of an outcome that happened, but maybe
Yeah.
you love the process of it, you know?
Yeah, and it wasn't something I expected, like, "Oh, like, I'm gonna do this to get experience to go into, television." Like, I never even thought about that, but it happened to work out because I did it, and I had it under my belt so I could show it as part of my portfolio. Um, but yeah, so I have had moments where I have not enjoyed what I was doing, but I just had to finish it.
Right.
I just had to finish it. Um, yeah, even there's been other projects too that I've been paid for to do, and I didn't realize how long they were gonna take, and it ends up taking more than expected. And I'm just like,
Yeah, that's
I just want to be done at that point.
that's that beginner's, I guess, figuring it out, you know, because just to because like, I've heard of that happening, and to get around that, I've started the idea of charging extra money, like, per extra, like, hour, you know? Because then that way you don't feel that way and find yourself in a situation, you know? And like that,
Yeah,
kinda give them a heads up, like, "Hey, like,
yeah,
for every modification or extra hour or something, it's gonna be this much," and then
yeah. And I actually, done that also for the balloon stuff. Like I've realized that sometimes they want big sculptures or something like that, and I'll charge a little bit more because at the end of the moment, there's something little that comes up, or like, hey, I need to buy actually another pole or whatever it is, and it cuts down on the on the profit, or like I didn't know how long it was going to take, or I have to take somebody else to make it faster, and so I have to pay them and have to pay myself.
Right.
So so all of that into consideration, whenever creating new projects, I always charge them more. Like even at the restaurant, if somebody asks me like, "Hey, can you make me this new character?" I'll always charge him like $5 to $10 more, just because I know it's gonna take me like more time to
Yeah.
figure it out.
You
And
adapt it.
maybe like I get to a point and I'm like, oh, it doesn't really look that good. So I might have to like cut out some stuff and like add some new things. And that is usually like taking away time from like getting other customers. But here's the thing, I think what's so cool is that if I don't open myself up to new challenges, I'm not growing. So if I'm doing the same balloon figures, like, oh, the same Spider-Man, the same dinosaur, the same unicorn, like I'm doing the same things that people ask all the time, then in that case, I'm not growing. I'm not building up my repertoire, adding new characters. So
Ah, so you have to
so
fall
you have to
back.
be open to challenges, to new things, even though it's gonna cost you money, right? It's gonna cost you, or it's gonna cost you something. It's gonna cost you time, money, energy. But if you don't venture into risky situations or new opportunities, then there's never an opportunity to grow. And people can, and this is another thing that I just thought about right now. People can sometimes feel comfortable just doing the same thing over and over,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
I write songs this way because it's what gets me the most hits, or it's helped me um record with Justin Bieber and like big artists, Chris Brown, and now this is my recipe and my formula to creating art, which is awesome. If somebody actually enjoys creating new art through that, and they're able to create new stuff, but if they're it's like similar melodies, the same structure, the same idea of the song, like it's another love song and a breakup song, or it's the same lyrics, then people have heard that already. People have seen that already. And so that's why sometimes for me, like with balloon art, I understand that sometimes like the customer that's going to buy this has never seen what I've done for thousands of times already, right? They've never seen my unicorn. They've never seen my dinosaur. They've never seen. So sometimes for me, it's not like a big deal. I just know I've perfected it over the years, but that's the aspect. I haven't kept the same design. I've actually evolved the design and added new things to make it look better. And
Yeah,
so if I don't go back and evolve those those ideas or those thoughts, or use or sometimes it's just changing the marker that like it writes on the balloon much better, and it makes it stand out, or something like that, and that in itself helps evolve the design. And so it's perfecting little by little. Now instead of adding the arm with color red, now there's a different color red that makes it look more like the character, or just whatever,
yeah, changing.
so it's evolving and using new things. But that's what I try to do, because if I don't put myself in that situation, I just stay stuck in the same level. And I've seen that a lot of people just like that. They don't try new things, they don't buy new things, they don't take the risk. Like for me, I invested in like these like thinner balloons and thicker balloons, and
Uh,
I've been able to create new designs from that, because I'm like, oh, like for the belt, I can use this thinner balloon so that it doesn't look too bulky,
right.
and it gives it a better definition for that detail. And for this thicker balloon, I can make the face just with one balloon instead of making it with several, and so it looks like smoother. Um, just different stuff like that that I've been able to use to venture into new ideas and new things. But if I didn't take the risk of investing in those types of balloons, I would have never known if I could have done something new with them, right? Or make my balloons better. But I have noticed that every time I take the risk of buying something different, and actually my brother, he was always very resistant. He's like, I don't know if you should buy that. Like, he's like, if you're gonna buy that, because we both invest in the balloon business. And so he's like, if you're gonna buy that, like, I don't know, maybe I might not help you out with it. But then I start using it for my characters, and he's like, you know what? Yeah, I think I'm gonna use them as well. And so he starts seeing that there's actual value to
Right.
venturing into new ideas. And so I just do it because I want to try something new. Like it's like when you have with music you just have the same notes, right? But like as an artist, like when you have, or like particularly talking about balloon art, when I have new tools or new materials that I can play around with, it's just like, oh, like this is something new I can make with this type of balloon.
Right.
Yeah, it's just venturing and taking the risk of, seeing if it's gonna work out. If it doesn't, like, heck, you at least tried it and now can say you that it didn't work.
That makes sense. You adapt and learn
Yeah,
by trying new things because you're in love with the process.
exactly.
That's what it's about.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's interesting, man. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've and sometimes like on the spot, like you it's just pushing yourself to take risks in art. Like that the aspect of risk is the the practice. Like, hey, I'm just gonna try to put this spoon in a different location, or or with cooking. This time instead of cooking with pepper, I'm gonna put oregano. And see how the food tastes. Just
Mm.
changing it up a little bit. Doesn't have to be big risks. It doesn't have to be like from 1 to 100. It could be from 1 to 1.1, but it's just taking that little step into a risky step. It doesn't have to cost you much, but it's just seeing it from a different angle. And I think that's where new ideas can thrive from. And
Yeah.
so it's falling in love with that.
Yeah. The fear of the risks, that how risks could affect the outcome, can probably hold people back from trying something new and creative.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just feel really passionate about this topic because, sometimes it's where do I find the motivation to do it, right? To do the work. And sometimes it can be hard because, like I said before, sometimes, I mean, I think I've mastered the practice of just doing balloon art, but with music, which is something that I'm doing more, it's sometimes it's sometimes like scary. It's scary to just not know what you're gonna do, or I'm so focused on like it being good, and then the next day, like, I'm like, oh man, that took so much out of me. I don't know if I want to do it again. But I want to do it. And so it's just like fighting through that initial resistance to to uh to things like where it's gonna take me. And I think we're so caught up with the idea of productivity as well, of like, oh, we have to put out work, we have to put out work, we have to be
Yeah.
productive,
Right.
that like taking the time to invent something or to fail or to just be curious about something, we don't see that as valuable, right? We see that as wasting time.
Right.
And so if there's no outcome, if we're not producing, then it's wasting time.
Yeah, and leads people to rush through it, and it may not turn out as innovative as a result, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think those are mainly the big thoughts on that. Do you have any last thoughts, Steele?
Um, I just think that being in love with the process has an effect on how the outcome can turn out. So, I definitely think so. Like the mindset and everything, for sure.
Yeah. And one last thing that I want to say is that I thought was interesting is that our actions can sometimes alter our identity of who we are. So if somebody says like, and it's interesting. I was actually talking to my friend about this because she was saying that there was she's a babysitter, and so she was saying that one of the kids that she's babysitting, she was having problems like reading, but then the mom started telling her how good she was at reading, and the more that she re-emphasized that idea, the girl actually started getting really good at reading, and it was through the aspect of doing it and believing that it was actually good, or that the outcome was favorable. And so she kept on doing it to the point where now she's like a really good reader. And so sometimes our identity um can be based on either the story that we tell ourselves or the actions that we do. And so we can get caught up on the story that we tell ourselves, like, oh, we're not good enough, we're not creative, you'll never get successful work out there. Your circumstances are against you. You don't have a good voice, you don't have a the camera that you need in order to shoot this video or this movie. You don't have that. But if we tell ourselves that story, then we'll never get anywhere. But if our actions start somewhere, whether the shot doesn't come out that well, or whether you fall flat while singing, whatever it is, it's just doing it and continue doing it, and
Right.
the actions will eventually get catch up to a level where you're actually proficient in it, and so your identity now has a new standard. You're like, oh, okay, I am a creative, I am an artist, I am a film producer, color artist, whatever it might be. So our actions define our not only our path, but also can define our story and what we believe of ourselves. Um, so yeah, just do the work, and eventually the identity will catch up to actually feel like you are a an artist.
Yeah, I think so too. Practice.
Practice, yeah, yeah. It's called the
Uh,
practice by Seth Godin. So yeah, so well, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for watching this podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen in to today's podcast. And thank you again. This is the 100th episode of Out of the Box podcast. We appreciate everyone who has subscribed, who has been with us in this journey. Let us know what you think down below of this video, what you enjoyed. Are you going to start a certain practice? And let us know. We want to hear from you guys what kind of work you're producing. So, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so. And until next time, we will talk to you soon. Take care.